Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our weekly class here on Navigating Parenting. Thank you for taking your time and bringing your energy to this platform and for using your resources to invest in yourselves, in your children, and in your relationship with yourself and your children. Today, we are going to talk about intention. Mindset is a huge, enormous part of parenting. It's so important for so many reasons, but first of all, because it affects the way that we feel, the way that we interact with our children, the way that the vibe, the energy of our family is, of our home is, of our interactions with our children, right? Because mindset is all about starting within us and understanding that where we put our mind, where we put our intention, where we put our energy is what we then create in our reality. And so many times in parenting, we see our children as beyond our influence, beyond our control, I should say, because we know that our children are influenced by us, but then what if they're behaving in a way that we don't like or we don't know what to do with? And it really feels outside of our control, which is why then we go on to grab for, power tactics, ways that we can regain control over our children and our relationship with them and the situation, whatever the challenging situation is that we have with them. And we learn a lot of those tools. But today we're going to talk about our mindset and how our mindset plays into creating a beautiful relationship with our children, regaining the power, not over our children, but regaining the power within our relationship with them, right? We learn a lot about words that we use and actions we can take or not take when it comes to our relationship with our children. But our thoughts are equally, if not even more important and impact our children and who they grew up to be in our relationship with them. Now, many times when we have challenges with our children, we do a few things. The first is when we see certain characteristics repetitive and coming out with our children a lot, we may start to label them. Whether it's in our minds or we actually say them out loud, we may call them a name. That could be stubborn, that could be angry, that could be uncooperative. We could tell them that they make us feel certain ways. You make me feel anxious, or you're making me angry, or you're making me so sad with the way that you're behaving, right? We describe their characteristics, but we call them their characteristics. We may then use those labels or those difficult characteristics as excuses for why they behave a certain way. We may get really annoyed at them and frustrated or kind of even give up on them for the certain negative characteristics that we see in them or that we think about them, right? Through the thoughts that we have about our children, how we label them, what we call them. Again, it doesn't have to mean that you're calling them names, but you may just have, a vision of your child in your head that is not always angelic. And we all have it, and it's okay, right? And that can become the focus of our experience with our kids, right? If we see our child as having an issue with being angry or being bossy or being disrespectful, we may begin to see them through glasses of the color of the characteristic that we're annoyed at them about. And that's how we start to think about them. What happens is the more that we have those thoughts about them, the more as we see them in those ways, our brain gets locked into this idea that our child is that way. And so then whenever we're going to approach an experience with them or a situation with them or something that may be challenging, we're going to start to fear their reaction. We're going to start to believe that we know what to expect from them. And it's less than exemplary. It's less than what we want. And so we start to view our children through those limitations, right? We start to just expect that they're going to behave a certain way. When we start to expect a certain thing from our child, which is less than the beauty that they are, less than the purity that they are, right? When we start to expect that they're going to have a reaction that we know is uncooperative and is going to be really difficult, what happens is that's where we put our intention, right? Have you ever heard the saying where your thoughts go, your energy flows? So when we start to have all of these thoughts about our child, she's really stubborn, she's difficult, she's angry, she's bossy, right? He's uncooperative, he's uncommunicative, he's so difficult, he's my difficult one. Then we actually create that reality for our child and within our experience with our child. The more that we think it, the more we actually create it. And so we will have all of those really challenging moments with them. We will have a child who is always tantruming, who is never cooperative, who is not communicating clearly, who is being really difficult at school, who is speaking disrespectfully, because we know in our minds, again, even if we're not communicating it to them, we are expecting that from them. Where we put our intention, where we put our thoughts is what then we create in our life. And that goes the same way with our children, right? And so it affects them and it affects us. And it affects our relationship with them deeply and our interactions with them deeply, right? So I'd like you to take a minute and think of your child, one of your children, that you have come to expect difficult reactions from them. And think about how much energy and how much time you put into worrying about those reactions or expecting those reactions, focusing on those reactions, talking about those reactions, or talking about those, less than exemplary characteristics with your partner or with your parent or with a teacher or with a friend, venting about your child. And we do it. And the point of this is not to create guilt or not to make you think, oh my gosh, it's my fault my kid is behaving this way. Absolutely not, right? There's so much that goes into a child's behavior. However, we know that when we begin to shift our thoughts away from, I'm expecting the bad, I'm expecting the worst, I'm expecting a tantrum or disrespect, or there's not going to be cooperation in the morning before getting ready for school, or I know that my kids are going to procrastinate bedtime, then surely they will. But if we can learn to shift the way that we're thinking about our kids, we can actually, just by doing that, shift their behavior. How cool is that? So all of the other classes may be really important, but if we can just start to shift our intention, right? Shift the way that we see challenges going with our kids, then we can shift our entire reality. We can actually create the space where our child can change, can grow, can feel happier, can feel like they want to cooperate, which of course will then also make them feel happier, right? Visualization has become something that is more mainstream, I think, than it ever was. We can actually use visualization techniques with our children. Okay, it's not just for business. It's not just for our own personal growth. It's not just for the kind of house we want to move into, right? Or the kind of wardrobe we want to own, or a vacation that we're, visualizing and we're creating in our minds. We can visualize and create our relationship with our children and also our child, our interactions with them, and how they feel, most importantly, about themselves, right? So how do we do it? How do we go about implementing this as a tool and changing the way that we view and interact with our kids, and therefore, right, who they are? How do we do it? So the first step, which is really important, but not so simple, is to begin to notice our judgments. Because all of that we spoke about until now, labeling our children, right? Coming to expect their reaction is a judgment. It's what we believe based on maybe past experiences that may have been true, but the current or the coming experience hasn't happened yet. And so no matter what has happened in the past, if we're expecting a negative reaction from something to come, we are judging. We're judging the person and we're judging the situation. So the first thing is to just start to notice your judgments and be honest about them. It's really hard sometimes to be honest about what we truly think and believe about our children, because I mean, what does that make me as a parent if I believe the worst about my kid, or if I know that they're awful or difficult in certain situations and moments? What does that mean about me as a parent? It can be really hard to admit that, I think my child is less than stellar. We may be having the thoughts, but to be really honest about what do you truly believe about your child, right? Even if it's the worst thing in the world to you. Be honest, because if you're not really honest about what your thoughts are and how much you're judging your child, then you will never be able to change it. And we all do it because we're human. So we're all in the same boat. And I'm going to share a personal experience at the end of this class with you about a moment that I was able to change, but I was definitely judging my child a lot up until then. What have we come to expect from our kid? That's a judgment. Okay? Now, once we're noticing our judgments and we're being honest about them and we're clear on what they are, think, is that fair to my child, right? Do they really deserve me to have those feelings about them? And maybe you're going to say, yes, they do because of how they've behaved in the past, but they're children, right? Let's remember that kids are developing, right? Up until the age of 7, they have no ability to regulate their emotions scientifically. Their brains can't handle it. And up until their 20s, a person isn't even fully, their brain isn't even fully developed in a way that they can fully handle emotion. So for sure, for whatever age your child is right now, they're still growing and they're learning. And they haven't yet, when we're sitting here in a calm place, we can probably, say our child hasn't grown into a person yet that can handle themselves or know how to handle themselves in every challenge. As adults, many of us can't even, right? So is it really fair to my child to just come to expect and already write them off as angry or mean or uncooperative or difficult? Is that fair to them? What chance am I giving them if I am seeing them through these glasses all the time? Do they really deserve those feelings? How bad has what they've done really been? Like in the grand scheme of life, is it really that bad? Notice, it may have felt really bad for you as a parent, but being able to distinguish how it felt for you as a parent because you felt really embarrassed or it made you really angry or really frustrated versus how bad the action really was, right? So usually if we're looking at it like that, the action wasn't as bad as just what was triggered within us and so how we felt. But let's say it was, okay, they're still kids. Don't they deserve a second chance or a third or fourth or maybe 10th chance? But if it is the 10th chance, have you ever changed your intention around your child before this? Right? We have to give ourselves more chances too and look to see how we can make shifts and changes. So notice your judgments, be really honest about them. And then is it fair to your child? Do they really deserve that label? Right? You know who they are in their essence. You know who they truly are in their purest form. And I imagine you have so much love and respect for that pure soul inside of that child, right? What do you know to be true about them? They can be really uncooperative, but they're also really kind. They can get really, really angry, but they're also really responsible. Your child might be really difficult, but they're also, very gentle. So, what do you know to really be true about your child? Who are they in their purest form? And hang on to that. Picture it and hang on to it really deep, right? Really connect with that and focus on that. Focus on who they are in their essence and feel and see that pure, delicious, lovable, gentle, kind, empathetic, sensitive child. Connect with who they really are in a deep way. And as you do that and you really focus in on that, you're already starting to put a different intention into the way that you view your child. So every time you see, those difficult things coming out, and they will continue to, because we're human and we're going through human experiences, right? One thing we can do is flip it and start to say, you know what, I see they're being really mean in this moment. They might be acting mean, but I know inside of them, they're also really gentle. And something must have triggered them. And then, I have lots of classes on where to go with that. But we're talking about setting our intention. So it's all about our mind right now. It's all mind work. Okay, so focus in on that beauty, that purity that exists with your child in that challenging moment, so that you can see the situation differently. You can start to, rather than label your child in the difficult with the difficult names, start labeling them so that you just see them through these pure glasses. And I'm not talking about not being naive to the challenges that they have, right? I'm just talking about how we're going to shift our mind to really believe only what's truly best in our child. Because when we're focusing on the difficult aspects of their personality, we begin to believe that that's who our children are. It's human nature. It's the way our brains work, okay? That's what we believe about them. But the more we can believe the goodness, the purity of heart that they have, then that's where our focus goes. So focus in on the goodness. Start to see them through those glasses, because then they will begin to see it and believe it in themselves. Children are so receptive to feelings all around them, to what people think about them, right? And even if we just pretty much keep it in our minds, it always spills out somehow in our language or somehow in our interaction with them. Or maybe we keep them from play dates, or we keep them from special experiences because we are worried that they're going to be too difficult or too angry, not be able to regulate themselves through them. And sometimes there's a call to make, right? We know that taking a child who, doesn't do well when they're tired out too late at night is setting them up for failure, right? That's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about a child who has struggled with having play dates in the past, maybe. And so we've just decided that they're no good at play dates, and we just took them away from them completely, rather than, right, seeing them as becoming really good at play dates, knowing that they can grow into a child who can go and play with another child and they, independently and get along really well with them. So we want to begin to shift and see the situation completely differently until now, and in great detail, okay? In such a detail where we see our child who has issues with playdates going off, having a playdate, and we see how they feel in that playdate. We see and we envision how the other child reacts so well, right? Because they're getting along so well, and the other child is really happy to have your child on a playdate with them. And then we feel into how we feel as parents once our child has had a successful playdate. Right? How does it feel to pick them up from that play date? And how does it feel to take them home and hear about the wonderful time that they had? Or maybe the conflict that they had, but they learned how to get through the conflict with them, right? Because it's just like been such an amazing experience of growth, right? Setting good intentions doesn't mean there won't be conflict or challenge. It just means that we're learning how to handle it differently. Your child's handling it differently. The whole energy of the experience can completely shift. So again, it's noticing our judgments and being really honest with them about them. Is it fair to your child? Do they deserve those feelings? And then what do you know to be true about them? This is how then you shift, right? Because it can be really hard to shift out of judgment. So if we're going to shift into, believing the best about our child and the purity of their heart, we want to, and the intention through which we see them and view them, we want to, that can be really hard. So we want to really tap into like the deepest part, the purest part of their soul, where we know, how wonderful and special and amazing they are, and focus in on that and let that guide you and hold you into being able to envision like this beautiful, space where your child is able to handle challenges differently, right? And see it in great detail. And how do you feel as you go through it? How does your child feel? What are the amazing feelings that come up for them? Feeling at peace, feeling at ease, confidence, right? Connectivity, connection. They feel like they want to cooperate. They feel like they want to be kind. How does your child feel through it? How do the other people around you feel through it? How does it affect everyone in a positive way, right? This is how we can shift, how we can start to create and build and visualize a different intention for ourselves and for our children. And I'm just going to end with sharing a personal example. I promised I would. When my daughter was in kindergarten, it was like a whole thing. Every day after school, she wanted to go and have a play date with another friend. And some days it worked, but many days it didn't because she finished school late. And we needed to get home and start to have, dinner and do baths and wrap up our night at home. And play dates after school just didn't work so well for our families, but a lot of families, it worked well for them. And so my daughter was feeling, really upset and left out. And she would have an enormous tantrum when I picked her up from school because she wanted a play date. And she would see the other kids probably going off to play dates, which didn't help. And so I started to grow fearful of picking her up from school and expectant of those big tantrums. Like, oh boy, it's going to be so hard. She would like literally throw her backpack across the floor, act out a lot, which of course was a reaction to many other things, not just the tantrum. And not just the lack of play date, I'm sorry, but it still manifested in that way. And it always was, she like let it out. Of course, when she saw me, because that's what kids usually do when they see their parents, it's their safe space to let out whatever happened in the day. But it also was her, she would start to throw this big tantrum and want to play date. And I grew fearful of picking her up. I knew what was going to come. I would go in already like anxious and tense and stressed, and sure enough, it would happen. Until I decided to change my intention, to change my mindset about how I was picking her up. And I started to see it go completely differently. I started to see her ask me for a play date, which is okay. I don't mind her asking. But when I would say, not today, she would accept the answer. And she may be disappointed, but she was okay with it. She respected it. She understood that play dates just didn't work for us after school. There were weekends were for play dates, maybe Friday after school is for play dates, but not in the middle of the week. And I started to see her, understanding that. I started to visualize her accepting it and walking out of school calmly, rationally, with her backpack still on her back, and she didn't throw it across the floor, getting into the car and being in a really great connected mood throughout the rest of the day. And of course, having play dates and times when it worked for us as a family and enjoying them when she would go through them. And I promise you, it all shifted. As soon as I shifted my intention and I shifted the way that I would, see the end of a school day going, she started to shift too. She started to accept it and turn no, not today. She started to be okay with it. She would instead come and say, Mommy, can I have a play date with this friend on Sunday? And I would say, absolutely, that's such a great idea. I can't wait for that play date. We shifted the entire dynamic, and picking her up from school started to be a pleasure because I created it. I created that pleasure. It wasn't up to my, at the time, 5-year-old daughter. It was up to me. As the parent, it's up to me to change my thoughts, to shift my intention, and then, therefore, change my dynamic, my interaction with my child. Instead of thinking of her as difficult and, volcanic emotions, I started to see her as calm, as accepting, as cooperative. And she started to be that way. And so I wish for you the experience of shifting your intentions with your child, shifting your relationship with your child, and seeing it come to fruition in a really beautiful, positive, connected, happy, fulfilled way. Thank you so much for joining us here, for being a part of the Navigating Parenting community, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.